Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who make this such a special place to live, work, and great show today. Before we get to our guests, I want to just share one quick something that somebody posted on Facebook that I think it's a theme of the show. If there's nothing else, this is it. But here's what it says. When our time on this earth is done, money and material things will not matter, but the love, time, and kindness we have given to others will shine on and live forever. You know, that's a lot about legacy and how we treat each other. I think one of the things, if there's a theme of this show, there's certainly goals, and we're going to be talking more about that here in just a second, but there's a theme. It's about paying it forward. It's about caring about your friends and your neighbors and your family and your coworkers. I think that there's a core value in the DNA of coastal Mississippians that makes this such a special place, that we care about each other. And I think when people visit here, they see that in us. I think that's one of the reasons we're so darn resilient when we get hit hard by natural disasters. But it's always good to be reminded of that. Take a minute and freeze frame your moment and thank goodness for the friends and family and neighbors and co-workers and this great community that you live in. I think that's just really good advice. Okay, so anyway, we're going to shift gears now. It's been a while since I had my friend Anthony Wilson, the chairman, the president, and CEO of Mississippi Power, with us, and he's going to be joining me today for the entire show. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm great, Ricky. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, Good. Listen, I went back and looked at. I was just kind of doing some research. I wanted to remember, when we first met. And it was one of the first couple of weeks we started Coast Vue. So it's been nearly 3 years ago. It's amazing. I know you've been on the show a couple of times since then, but over 5,000 people interacted with that conversation. I thought that was interesting. We get insights on Facebook. So people care about your leadership. And I think, one of the comments, I looked in the comment stream, and actually one of the commenters was Jerry St. Pay, of all people. He went into the comment stream. And here's what he wrote. He said, Anthony Wilson generates, along with Mississippi Power, an engaging community leadership that keeps the Gulf Coast in the forefront of economic development and quality of life. I thought that was terrific. And you would expect Jerry St. Pay to make such an observation, but he certainly knows. It's been my experience, and through so many different iterations of my career and on so many different dimensions, that Mississippi Power has always provided a tremendous leadership in this community. And let me say one more thing, and just to remind folks that didn't hear that conversation, that this has been true of just about every leader that's led your organization, but you're certainly no exception. If anything, you have kind of a leg up on all of them because you're from D'Iberville, you're a coast of Mississippian to the core. You've had so many opportunities to represent this community on the state level and economic development efforts, et cetera. As you and I discussed in our first discussion, you're married to a woman of Croatian descent, just as I am. That makes us even, I think, rooted a little bit more in this community. But you're a special guy, and we're lucky to have you in this community. So I'm really looking forward to catching up with you today.
Well, thank you, Ricky. That's all very kind. This is a special place. Kind of going back to your introduction. The Gulf Coast and really the state of Mississippi, I think, is quite unique in the relationships that we have with not only the people that we've known forever, friends and like yourself and family, but it doesn't take long for somebody new to this area to become part of that. And, I can't really explain how or why that happens. I guess if we could certainly bottle it up and sell it. But it's a unique characteristic of the coast and of the state, and we should all be proud of that, like you said.
Well, listen, we're going to cover a lot of territory. Coastal Mississippi is the economic engine that drives this state. You and I have talked about that many times. I want to get your perspective on the coast economy situation, which is doing better than most, but we'll get your perspective on that. I want to get the latest coming on your company. What's happening at your company these days, since it's been a while since we talked. And we're going to talk a little bit about, in maybe the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about this challenge that I discussed at the One Coast Awards this year. Some things that every community fights, but it's something we have to be focused on. And if we stay focused on it, we can continue to raise the bar. And we'll come back to that in just a second. I think really a kind of a good place to start is how's it going, man? What's the latest at your company?
Well, begin with, we're all, I think, very fortunate that the hurricane season has been a little milder, knock on wood, than many anticipated. They were talking about up to like 16, 18 storms this year, and we've not come anywhere close to that, thankfully. I guess we're kind of due to have a little bit of a slow year, but as you know, I mean, that this time of the year, we're really geared up to respond, and it's been a little slower, and I think that's a very good thing, because all that's going on in the the national and worldwide economy, a really bad set of storms could really set the country back, and we don't need that right now. So we're very blessed, I think, to have had a bit of a mild year. So that's been good for the company. That's allowed us to really focus on some of the things that we had in our plan to do. A lot of construction activity. We've done a lot of technical advancement on the infrastructure. The poles and wire out there. People don't realize we have about 60% of that now is behind a complete automated scheme, which means a car hits a pole, the scheme corrects itself without any human intervention, which has been tremendous. We've actually had the best reliability in the state in our history last year, and if things stay on track, this year will be better than last year. So, technology is really working, I think, to the betterment of the state and for our customers. So that's what we've really been focused on. And I guess as partner to that, after the pandemic, things were, I think, in the communities slow to get ramped back up in terms of just doing community events, as you well know, because you're involved in so many of them. We've gotten our employees back out there. We've turned them loose. We don't have to push them very hard. We just told them it's good to go, and they've really been back out there involved in the things that matter to our community. So it's been a good year.
It has been a good year. I've talked a lot about the hurricane season because obviously we're all so darn conditioned by it, and it was supposed to be another really, really active season. And as you pointed out, we didn't experience that. And it was interesting to look at Cruising the Coast this year, which was a record year. I mean, just incredibly successful. What a great event that is, not just for the coast, for the state of Mississippi, but to look at the beautiful beach and, the sea oats and, how just ready we were in coastal Mississippi for that event this year. And to reflect a bit about how, if we had to deal with, when we're resilient, we're going to bounce back from just about anything these days. But the fact that we didn't have to deal with that, we were able to have an even better and more of a shining moment in that event. And so, to me, that event sort of represents the end of the season, even though, of course, Zeta was a big surprise and obviously created big challenges for us. But even with Zeta, we bounced back pretty rapidly, considering as significant as that was. But we're lucky. Hey, what people maybe don't appreciate, if they haven't heard you and I talk before, for your company, it's not just about us getting hit, but it's about this unbelievably intricate plan that you have to support other power companies throughout the coastal region. So while we may not have gotten direct hits in the last year or two, boy, others have, and your team has been super busy supporting other communities.
Yeah, we really have. The electric utilities have a mutual assistance process, really, I guess is what you would call it, where no matter who gets hit, the others are going to come. And in the response rate to that is just unbelievable. I mean, it's like 100%, because all of us know that at some point we're going to be the one asking for that kind of support to come our way. And we've been the beneficiaries of that in the past, and we certainly try to go out and help as much as we possibly can. Ida was a terrible storm, as you know. A lot of customers impacted in Florida. Interesting, the mutual assistance plan for us, they asked us to actually go up on the East Coast as the storm went back out into the Atlantic and back into the East Coast. We were slated to go up into the Carolinas.
Let's do this, Anthony. We'll pick up right there when we come back on the other side and talk about the master plan around Hurricane Ian. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Anthony Wilson, who is the chairman, president, and CEO of Mississippi Power. When we went to break, we were actually talking a little bit about Hurricane Ian and the sort of how that master plan played out. Your team didn't go directly to Florida, but instead were dispatched to the East Coast to sort of deal with the impact of the storm there. You can finish that part of the story.
Yeah, what I was going to say as we went to break was that the storm did hit, but it didn't cause the kind of damage that they had anticipated. So then they turned us around, headed us back south, like we were headed into Florida. And then at that point, they had probably 40,000 line personnel in Florida, so they decided they didn't have room for or need for any further assistance. So we came back home. So it was a couple days of driving, but that's okay. I mean, that's what we all plan to try to do to help each other. So it really did a good job getting lights back on.
Yeah, I've been studying the numbers coming from the Red Cross, and the impact was significant, as we all know, for Fort Myers Beach and Fort Myers and those surrounding communities. But it hit a really highly populated area, and there are going to be a lot of needs. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people flooded who didn't have flood insurance. We experienced that here after Hurricane Katrina. But if you look at the damage estimates on like major damage, for example, not nearly what they initially expected. But again, in those concentrated areas, we're talking about obliteration, really extraordinarily challenging times. But if you were to sort of take that fingerprint of the impact and move it up to Tampa Bay, man, that would have been potentially the worst case scenario for Tampa Bay, and that didn't play out. But there's so many areas of the Gulf Coast that are like ticking time bombs for one of those major hurricanes, and we keep getting lucky, but eventually we're not going to be lucky. And I think we'll see a blip on the economic barometer for the entire United States when that worst case scenario hits, a direct hit to Fort Lauderdale or Miami or Tampa or Houston, in the way that it could from a storm surge point of view. But it's coming. But you guys are ready when it happens, aren't you?
I think we are. We're well practiced, and it's something that's really, really important to our company and to our employees, and we owe that to our customers because they're counting on us. As you and I have talked about in the past, electricity is it's a quality of life product. I mean, you lose your electricity, the way we live our lives changes, and we know that, and we're very attuned to trying to not let that happen for any longer than it absolutely has to.
Well, you mentioned the automation that's happening now, and that 60% is automated. That is no small project that you guys have been involved in. It's a multi-year project, and if I had to describe it as something sort of related to this response that we're talking about at hurricanes, I mean, it is an effort to make you certainly more productive and more efficient, but at the same time, a hell of a lot more resilient. Yeah. And when you're talking about it not having to have human interaction when for example, someone hits a telephone pole like you talked about a few minutes ago, or the ability to kind of bounce back after a storm, it has had significant impact to your resiliency, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, Ricky. It's you still have to send line crews out to replace that pole that was hit, but the power on both sides of it is restored automatically. And it would have been tough to imagine that 20 years ago. So the technology's changed very quickly. But it's not only that. It's using higher class. When I say higher class, bigger, more resilient poles. Some people think that putting everything underground solves a lot of storm problems. It really does not, because you get saltwater intrusion into all the underground equipment. So that's a problem for a community like ours. It might be an answer if you're 20 miles off the coast, but there's all kinds of things that play into and factor into what you do to an electric system when you're right here on the Gulf Coast. So we're pleased with what we've seen from that technology implementation, but there's more to do, and as things become available, we're going to use it.
Listen, I mentioned cruising the coast, and I think maybe cruising the coast is a good lead-in to a discussion about the coast economy and your current thinking about it. People said, with inflation and the price of gas, why did cruising the coast do so well? And I think one of the reasons it did so well is that, first of all, it's unlike any other cruising event in America. So if someone was going to choose, let's say like they do 2 events a year. One, they go to a field somewhere and have a great event and display their car, or they maybe also go to cruising the coast, which actually get to actually cruise in their car. If they had to choose between 2, they picked us because we have a competitive advantage. We have this incredible beach boulevard, and we have casinos and beauty, and this great, wonderful event that spans 40 miles of Mississippi's coast. That competitive advantage, you can start to break that down from a tourist point of view, whether it be Chevron or what's happening with Stennis. You start to break it down. In the wake of the pandemic, we performed incredibly better than a lot of communities like ours. And we still kind of held our own. But what's your read on it coming from you? You have the ability. You look at the ultimate barometer. So what's your read on it?
Yeah, it was a tremendous year this year. And, I'd like to say, well, they came because the weather was perfect, but they didn't know the weather was going to be perfect. That was just I guess, a blessing we all had during that 10 days. But, people are excited about being here. I'll give you a good example. I was talking to a guy at a restaurant during cruising, and he was from Illinois and had 2 cars here, and he goes to events all over the United States around, completely around the calendar. I mean, that's his thing. And he said that the cruising on the Mississippi Gulf Coast is his absolute favorite location. He's been coming here 16 years. And I asked him, well, why do you feel so strongly about the Mississippi Gulf Coast? And he says, because I feel welcome here. And I thought that was a great reason in just a few words for why he and his wife feel like, coming to the Gulf Coast is the highlight of their year. And they just feel like this is a welcoming place. People here are glad that they're here. The people that come have been coming like he has for a long time. So he says the fellow cruisers are all like family at this point. And, again, it kind of goes back to your introduction. I mean, this is a welcoming place. People feel like no matter where they're from, when they get here, they're at home. And, he confirmed that.
So that's a competitive advantage we have that contributes to our economic success. When you look at sort of the macros on the economic performance of coastal Mississippi, what do you see?
Well, if I look at the metrics that we look at, and that's new connections, new installs, we call it, we're going to have right at 2,000 this year just in our service territory. And that's a significant number, because that's not people, that's electrical connections. So each one of those connections has a family attached to it or a business attached to it. So there's literally thousands new people coming to the Gulf Coast that we see in those connections. And it's exciting. And for a while we saw residential connections, but very little commercial. But we're seeing the commercial follow behind that now. We had probably year to date, I think it's around 600 commercial connections. That's a big number for the coast. So that could be anything from a mom and pop drugstore to a Walmart all of that's classified as commercial. But in total, it's growing. And if you look at a little bit more micro look across our cities, I mean, look at the expansion that's going on in Pascagoula, with the new city center over there. That's good stuff. I mean, that's going to really help that whole entire area of Pascagoula, and then what's going on downtown in Biloxi. That is, not only is it a restoration of some really beautiful old buildings that we all love because we grew up here, but it's going to put life back into the downtown. And of course, there's some really big projects going on here in Gulfport. This project is potentially going to go, and I think will go, at the corner of 49 and 90 here. I think it's a game changer. It's mixed use. It's going to bring not only life back to this area after dark, because it's going to have very, very nice residential, but it's also going to have commercial underneath. I think that's going to be a great project. And you just go across the coast. There's good things going on all the way to Bay St. Louis. That's Bay St. Louis, Ocean Springs, they get a lot of the attention because, hey, they have done some great things to make those locations very popular. The cruisers, they'll tell you they love going to those little towns.
And I love the way all this connects back to the strategic plan around the new economy that the Gulf Coast Business Council put together. I mean, this is serious stuff that will pay dividends for many, many years to come. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Anthony Wilson from Mississippi Power Company. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have Anthony Wilson, the chairman, president, and CEO of Mississippi Power. And you know what? It's interesting. When you were talking, Anthony, if you listen to every show every day, what you would hear me say is a lot of what you just said about Ocean Springs and Bay St. Louis tend to be the communities people talk about when they get into this, walkable community and what's happening. But they don't tend to think of places like Pascagoula and Moss Point and Gulfport and Biloxi and what's happening in these other communities. They would think that I actually prepped you prior to the show, but I didn't. I didn't prep you prior to the show. But it's true. And the way it connects back to this notion of the new economy is that in the new economy, we have to build the kind of places that people want to live. That's where a lot of the opportunity is going to be. Certainly traditional industrial, economic development is still there, but where there is a huge opportunity is in this class of jobs that can live anywhere, and they're going to choose to live here because the cost of living is low, and we really get the fact that they want to live, work, and play in a similar area. We've really made a lot of good progress in that area, haven't we?
We really have. Economic development has changed from the way it's always been done. You used to have a particular site or building, and you still do need some of that for certain industries, but other industries are not looking for that. They're looking for the place that their employees would love to live, right? And then that's where they go, and then the communities at that juncture then has to come together and support that their desire to be in that community. It's a little reversed than the way it used to be, and I think we're on the front edge of figuring out how to play in that world. And the build outs that we just talked about, the expansions, the growth, is going to play directly into that. One of the biggest things that attracts these new companies into an area is a walkability scale. And I guess that's a new term in economic development, but it's very real, and it's about how walkable is the community. In other words, when one of these, and I'll say it, young folks move to an area like that, how walkable is that community? They want it to be very walkable. They want to be able to walk to church. They want to walk to the store. They want to walk to their job. They want to walk to everything. And, that's new to us, but it's new to a lot of communities. And the good news is, I think we're moving in that direction, and it's exciting to see.
I've had a couple on my show a couple of times, actually, just this past week. Just really inspiring couple. Their names are Shari and Craig Davis, and they opened the Jackson Pearl, which is a wedding and events place in downtown Ocean Springs, and also I guess it's a house that they rent out for events, and also people can stay there, called the Bootleg Howl in downtown Biloxi. You and I were talking, during the break, and you think about what the mayors of Moss Point and Pascagoula are doing to sort of help facilitate this and move it along. When Shari and Craig talk about it, they talked about one of the first meetings they had was with Kenny Holloway in downtown Ocean Springs, and how accommodating he was and how he worked with them to move things along. Then they talked about the effort in Biloxi and how working with FOFO was so amazing. We've got a stretch of coast mayors now. So many of them had success in their lives and didn't actually need to be mayor, but they wanted to be mayor to make a contribution back to the communities they grew up in. But we're lucky in that we have this great collection of mayors that feel a sense of urgency and want to facilitate. And that's kind of, the point that you were making a few minutes ago, but it is terrific to see, isn't it?
It really is. You and I both have lived in different communities and different states, and to have a collection of mayors like we have is pretty rare. I mean, it doesn't happen in every community, and they really are, to begin with, they're good people. If you can start with that, and they are good people, and they want the best for their community, and they're doing their best to move the ball forward, and I think they're having some success because they're working together. That's something that's new to the coast, I think. They're working together to the betterment of the entire coast. And and in doing so, their own communities are really benefiting.
There's no doubt about that. I give Billy Hughes a lot of credit with the One Coast concept and the fact that these mayors are having regular meetings and conference calls, and they can be competitive, but there's a lot of things they share, and all those things they share, they should speak with one voice, and I think they've done a much better job at that. I had the opportunity this year to give the keynote for the One Coast Awards, and I want to get your thoughts on what this challenge that I shared with them entails. So let me just I'm going to read a quick little segment from this. But we have to get better at fighting ever-present challenges that work overtime to hold regions like ours back. Now, I go on to say that these are challenges that exist in any community, and we've got to just be focused on it. That there is always going to be a serious gravity toward mediocrity, and we're not immune to that gravity. Too many people work too hard to protect the status quo. We've got to expect more from ourselves and elected officials. To win, there has to be trajectory. Without trajectory, there is no trajectory in mediocrity. So the first one is simply we've got to fight mediocrity. The second one, Jerry St. Pé talked about in a video that I shared, and he said that our biggest enemy is complacency. It keeps us from dreaming bigger. It zaps our collective energy as a region. Those regions that compete with ours, they pray for our complacency. And then the last one was this one, that we don't have enough leaders that get it. Most communities don't. We need more leaders who see what is possible, who covet our potential, who understand that we are a collection of communities that come together to create this powerful region with common goals. That's why leadership development is so important. And then I just close with this. These are the big time challenges, but leadership commitment, focus, and hard work will help us overcome these challenges and achieve things for coastal Mississippi beyond our wildest imagination. If I had to say Anthony, there's a theme for Coast Vue beyond celebrating people that make this a better place to live, work, and play, it would be that I would be urging private and public sector leaders to constantly, and citizens for that matter, to constantly fight the status quo, to want to raise the bar and to learn that complacency is our enemy. And one of the things that gives me hope is in over 700 conversations that I've had, more and more people get that, and more people are fighting up against that. But every community's got it. Everywhere you've been, everywhere I've been, that's always something you got to fight. And those that succeed more are the ones who do a great job of overcoming those challenges. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's ironically, we talk about complacency here at the company a lot, about especially around safety. We have a very, very good safety record, and we try to make sure that complacency never gets a foothold in our discussions and our culture surrounding taking care of each other in the safety environment. I think that very same thing holds true in our communities. Complacency, it's such a behind the scene kind of thing. You don't know that it's set in until something negative happens. And usually a series of negative things happen. And then you finally figure out, well, wait a minute, why did we let this and this happen? And sometimes it's simply because we felt like we had it going so well. Let's just don't rock the boat. Let's just hold what we have, and we're going to try to keep it as long as we can. And then if something bad happens, we'll deal with it. That may work for a few days or maybe even a few years. But if you start thinking about the long term and the next generation, that's what, you and I talk all the time about grandkids. You want the next generation to have an even more robust, better place to live than we even have today. And, you got to desire that, and you got to work toward that. It's not enough to want it. You got to be willing to invest a little of yourself in it to make it happen. And complacency it's a real thing, and it can be a very bad thing if we let it get a toehold.
I think that it's a lot about building kind of a head of steam and creating sort of a compelling case for action, a compelling vision for the set of communities that make up Coast of Mississippi, and then, making it so compelling that people, everyone's beginning to see what is possible. And then when they see what is possible, there's a drive and an energy and maybe some unacceptance of anyone who says, well, no, I don't really want that. I think we'll fight for the status quo. Now, look, fighting for the status quo usually happens in a very sort of behind the scenes kind of way. It's very passive aggressive, but like you just talked about your company, because you aren't achieving goals, the numbers are starting to look bad. And what gets measured ultimately gets done. When we come back with Anthony Wilson from Mississippi Power Company, we'll have a terrific final segment. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast Vue. First of all, Anthony Wilson, the chairman, CEO, and president of Mississippi Power, is with us today. He's a good friend, and we both desire great things for this community and for the generations to come, because there's so much potential here. One of the things we talked about a lot after Hurricane Katrina, and we sort of mentioned this in the early part of our conversation. When we built back after Hurricane Katrina, it was so important for us to build back into the infrastructure of this community, resiliency, so we had the ability to bounce back. Because the reality is that storms and other challenges were going to come, and we just had to have the ability to bounce back, and that's going to actually spell success for us going forward, because we spent billions of dollars building that into our infrastructure. But when you look at our region as the economic engine for the state, and you've been involved in statewide economic development efforts and just discussions around leadership in this community across Mississippi, not just in coastal Mississippi, when you think about, man, Chevron and Ingalls on one end, and what's happening at Stennis, and all that incredible innovation and new goals to go to space, and then, hospitality and all this other stuff, and what we just mentioned about building great communities that people want to live in. We have a lot going for ourselves, don't we?
We really do. And it may not feel like it to us, but the real estate prices are still, relative to other places in the country, are very affordable. And as we talk to some of our newer customers who are moving into the coastal area, they're saying that, not only is it the welcoming atmosphere here, that whole experience, but the prices here to live life is still reasonable. Now it's, I'm not saying it's cheap, but I'm saying it's relative to other communities all across this United States. These prices are very competitive. So that is drawing people in here, especially since now they can work most anywhere in a lot of different careers. That they can live anywhere and work virtually, just like the show we're doing today, and it's happening. I mean, you can talk to, if you bump into somebody at the grocery store, don't be surprised if they tell you, "Oh, we just moved here from Indiana." I ran into somebody the other day that had just moved their family from Indiana, and I said, "Well, why the Mississippi Gulf Coast?" And they said, "Well, we actually looked at what's it cost to live in different communities, assuming we wanted to live near the water. The water's always the thing, right?" And their research said, you need to check out coastal Mississippi. And they did. And long story short, they bought a home here and moved their family. And he still works in Indianapolis. That's his job, but he lives here. And that kind of thing happens a lot. There's so many things about the coast that's attractive that I don't think we really think about. But it's a place that people want to come, as long as we're investing in the livability of the Gulf Coast. And
the other point that I made in that challenge, and I just want to make sure we don't move past it too fast. It might be a great way to close out the show. The leadership development that's happening across the coast through the Business Council, through the chambers, through experiential leadership that's taking place in nonprofits and all of that, with leaders in this community expecting people who work inside their companies to get out and get in the trenches so they can learn more about what's happening and make a contribution back to the community. And I think when you get involved in that way, it makes your company stronger because you're more in touch with what's happening, but also you're able to help, fill gaps, the 1,000 points of light that I talk about all the time. But leadership development could not be more important it's hugely important to us in coastal Mississippi, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, as you know, because you've been associated with our company, that is something that is so important to us. I mean, we focus on leadership development at all levels of our company. And a big part of that is encouragement to get involved in the community. And, to me, people oftentimes are searching for the perfect place to jump in. But pick something that you like, pick something that you're passionate about, and jump in. Be a part of something, and before you know it, you've become a key part of making the coast better. I quote John Harrison all the time, but he talked about you got to do your reps. You just got to do your reps. Yeah. And there's something addictive really about getting in and working with others who care deeply about the community. And, whether it's at a ground level at something like United Way or the Mississippi Economic Development Council, the reality is that there are all these talented people working together. You can learn from all of them. I don't care how long you've been around. I mean, I was involved in so many different ways for so many years, and still on this show daily, I've learned something new about how we can raise the bar as it relates to leadership. Anyway, we're out of time, Anthony. It's been a pleasure, my friend, to visit with you today. Keep up the good work. Thank you. I always enjoy it, Ricky.
You bet, man. You bet. We'll see you. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.